poetry lovers and supporters. This is George Mason High School's English Department's 7th annual Poetry Out Loud event. Italo Calvino, an Italian journalist and writer, said, "It is not the voice that commands the story, it is the ear." This is to say that the responsive listener to the poem or story may have as much to do with the receiving of the poem as does the imaginative poet. In this way, participating in poetry is a co-creative exercise, so you're all involved. Poetry is a social activity in that these words are meant to be heard, meant to be shared. It has always been this way. Poets tell the stories, people listen. It's like an ancient recording system of the human history. You know, like the Iliad, the Odyssey, Beowulf. Plato had a point when he said poetry is nearer to vital truth than history. But I think the truth that Plato was talking about may have been a search for eternal truth. Humans have always been working on looking for that for a long time, even before poetry was written down. Can you imagine a scene with those ancient ones sitting around a campfire listening to poetry? Could they have even imagined all the mechanisms we have today for recording the human voice, listening to and receiving meaningful thoughts and sounds? Still, poetry is the way the ancient history of humanity is handed down through the ages. It's how we perceive our truth. To honor this poetic process through time, we ask that you listen with undivided attention. Polite applause is appropriate and welcome, but cheering as if at a sports venue is not. And we probably don't need to tell anyone to turn off your laptop or your cell phone. At this point, I would like to introduce you to a poet of our own time, Ms. Susan Tichy. She has said of her writing process that most poems begin as scraps of lines in notebooks, sometimes mixed up with lines that wind up in other poems. I'm picturing many notebooks with all these ideas just waiting to be assembled into poems. Her poems and mixed genre works have appeared in the US and Britain and have been recognized by the National Endowment for the Arts, a Pushcart Prize, and she has received numerous other awards. Since 1988, she has taught the graduate writing program at George Mason University. Several of her books of poetry can be found in our own George Mason Library. And she is here with us today to celebrate poetry. Please help me welcome Ms. Susan Tichy.
Thanks for that nice introduction. It's great to be here. The Poetry Out Loud, I think, is just a great program and a really great way to begin a lifetime with poetry. There wasn't anything like this when I was your age, and I can't help but imagine and wonder what its impact might have been if I'd had a chance to take part in something like this. I was 14 in the 9th grade when I decided I was going to be a poet, whatever that meant to me at the time. And I think the very best thing about Poetry Out Loud is not just that it is there as a program to support and encourage your interest in poetry. The very best thing is that it asks the participants, requires you actually, to focus on the whole poem and not just some paraphrasable content that your teacher or the writer or some examination question wants you to extract from the poem as if the poem's form was some kind of accident. And, you know, I hate to say it, and I hope it isn't true in your school, but in many places that's how poetry is taught. So there's a lecture that I give once in a while at George Mason to students who are just beginning their work as English majors, and I call it, "Why is a Poem a Poem?" which is about why a poem is more than its paraphrase, and not only why, but how a poem is not prose. And the first thing I say in that lecture is that language has this double nature. As you've probably already learned if you've been writing or reading poems a lot, it has the symbolic function we're all familiar with. It makes meaning through, the words are combined in grammar and syntax and so forth. But language also has this material nature. Language, words make noise. And sound is important and rhythm is important. These things matter a lot, and they're always part of meaning when we communicate. You can hear me say always part of meaning. That's putting some rhythm in that, right? But it's nowhere more important than it is in poetry. So what's great about poetry out loud is that you really have to embody the poem to do this well, and I'm sure everyone on this stage has learned this already. You're using your tongue, your teeth, your throat, and your vocal cords, your lungs, your whole body is in it. So you have to be in touch with all of the ways that the poem makes meaning in order to do this well, and that's what I think is so great in this program. So I'm going to read some poems, and I'll talk a little bit about each one of them, and I hope that will give you an idea of how I relate to poetry, what I use it for, what making poems means to me. One of the central subjects of my poetry over all the years, and it's many years I've been writing now, has been war and the consequences of war for people, for us. I was a war resistor in the Vietnam era, and then I later married a combat veteran of that war. He was a reluctant combatant, but he was a combatant. So for us, the war never really went away, and also it could never settle down into like a single meaning or a single narrative about what it meant, what it was. And I think that has had a really deep impression, deep influence on my poetry. So all the poems I'm going to read today are encounters with people in Vietnam. My husband went back more than once, but he and I went together in the year 2000 and spent a month there. You'll also hear you'll hear a focus on photographs and on just the whole question of representation in these poems. And then just a couple of factual things you need to remember. On two of the poems, you have to think a little bit about some of the more infamous weapons of that war, Agent Orange, the defoliant, and white phosphorus. The soldiers called white phosphorus Willie Peter, and that's what I call it in the poem. It's a flame weapon that burns down into the body and goes on burning inside the body even if the fire is put out on the outside. It's a really horrific weapon that is still in our arsenal. So my husband was in combat with the River Assault Force in the Mekong Delta. So one of the things we did was hire a small boat, a boatman and an interpreter, to visit places in the Delta from the water perspective, not from a road perspective, like by bus or something. So I'm going to read the first poem in the book that I wrote about that trip to Vietnam and about the war. It's a kind of a prologue. All the other poems in the book are in couplets, stanzas of 2 lines. This one is a prose poem in paragraph form, but it is called Couplet. And in this poem, there are 2 encounters, and it really did happen this way, that my husband and I each had at the exact same time a really significant encounter with someone deeply affected by that war. And you'll hear in the narrative how that happened. Couplet. Mang Tit River, February 2000. I would call the poem What I Did Not See. It would begin in the multiplied shade of the outdoor restaurant, the one we came to lost and accidental. 10 hours on the water, our interpreter already tired of the whole thing. The edge of the poem would be its bamboo fence, that and a handmade roof patched with plastic where it had to be. Enlisted in a cause of something real, a sense of place, a sense of time, the body sweating in its plastic chair, holding out for a cold beer or a slight rhyme. To write this, I would need a photograph, to know the man wore a loose, clean shirt with a neat hem, and would, in the ordinary course of things, stand not quite past your shoulder. But you were big. He wasn't small in his own world, and he isn't small in the poem. When he jumps up from his chair and charges you, and you stand up to meet him. And the fact that he doesn't hit you, and you don't hit him, is just a fact. I didn't see it. I had gone to piss on a clean slab of concrete by the river, or gone to keep my rendezvous with death's fragmented angel, depending on the mode of reportage that you prefer. Him blank behind the eyes, and tethered by his right ankle in that hot place with flies beside the river. A sniper in the DNA, I heard one poet call it, but I'm out of the business. When I see the plains in memory, I'm seeing footage, photographs. I wasn't there. Images of images, I could say, like calling the man right in front of you a ghost. He's showing you the bullet in his arm and the fist he's held for 30 years opening into a hand again, while this one shows me back here in the flies and heat, cut off from the breeze of the river, this fine romantic mist which I remember most things through. It's a cloud of poison, a special effect. I drop now through this sentence, so I can right here precisely say, what the plains sprayed, they sprayed so we could see. That's what they said. They said, so we could see. So this is simple, isn't it? You there, me there, the shooter shot, the one not born yet, born. So that poem and the one I'm going to read next are from my book called Bone Pagoda, which is the informal name of a pagoda in a town called Ba Chuk out on the Cambodian border. It gets its name from an ossuary there that preserves the bones of 3,000 people who were killed by the Khmer Rouge in 1978. So on the way back from visiting the Bone Pagoda, we stopped at this place called Sam Mountain, or Nui Sam in Vietnamese. It was supposed to be a restful stop, but it was not, for me at least, because this was my encounter there. So the poem is just called Nui Sam. On the steps of the pagoda, a man was begging. A man with no eyes was begging on the steps of the pagoda. It might be fire, it looks like that. It might be Willie Peter. A smooth, tight kind of burning to the bone, it might be that. Someone had drawn red circles. Maybe he had drawn them. Someone had drawn red circles where his eyes would be. It might be lipstick, it looks like that. It might be red lipstick. They make a place to look when you are looking, a place to put your eyes. It might be that. So the last one I'm going to read is just a section from a poem that's in a quite different form. I understand that creative writing students here have had a go at writing one of these. It's a poem called a ghazal or a ghazal, which is a very old form practiced in Arabic and Persian and Urdu and other languages from those parts of the world. In its true form, it has a lot of rules with rhyme and repetition and always addressed to a beloved, which could be a human lover or God. In modern times, it can even be an idea like freedom or revolution. But what interests me about the ghazal is that it's always written in couplets, and each one of those couplets is like its own separate little poem. And then all of those little separate couplets go together like a kind of mosaic effect to make the whole poem. So when people in other languages adopt the ghazal, as we have pretty enthusiastically in America, often the formal rules get dropped because the languages are so different. But that thing about the mosaic composition is what intrigues us. So it has become fairly common in English to write free verse ghazals, which is what mine are. But I don't like to forget its origin or forget that we have borrowed it and made it evolve in a certain way. So I always say that my ghazals are to real ghazals what American cheese is to real cheese. And that's, some of my friends don't like it when I say that because they think I'm insulting their ghazals, but I don't mean to. No. So the writing of this poem was written in the very early stages of our war in Iraq. And so photographs and reporting, you'll see those images come through the poem. But there's this narrative that does kind of persist, or this scene at least, that persists through the poem, which is in the Revolutionary Museum in Saigon, now Ho Chi Minh City, which is very strangely located in a French colonial mansion. And the chandeliers are still there, and the gardens are still there, and the grand staircase is still there, with like tanks among the rose bushes outside. And it's a very popular place for wedding photographs. So the encounter in this poem, I'm only going to read the first section of it, but you'll see the beginning of the encounter, is that the exact moment that I snapped a photograph of my husband and our tour guide from the museum there, a young woman who was dressed in the traditional ai dao, a very bright, glittering blue ai dao, just at the moment that she turned on her heel and walked away from my husband. And I did not know why, but I later found out it was because of his answer to the question, "Why are you here? Why are you interested in this museum?" And of course, his answer was that he was here before 75, which is the way the Vietnamese express the time of the American War. This is from a book called Galloglass, which is a strange word. It's an anglicized version of a Gallic word, galoglaich, which means a foreign soldier or a mercenary. So I'm just going to read the first of four parts that make up this poem, which is also called Galloglass. Today another helicopter crashed. Today another tank drove over a cut bank unto death. Likes to meet with potentates, said John Dean on the radio. Doesn't like to kiss babies. I imagine a lover's arm lying between my breasts. All right so far, but how would I advertise it? Voice says, mural on the water tower, or wild geese high in the air up Fleen, while two men sit on a park bench, watch sparrows pick dead bugs from the grills of cars. Here is the photograph, my husband and a tour guide, in front of the Victory mural, Revolutionary Museum, Saigon. He has bowed his head as if he were reading a caption down by his knees. Impetuous, firebrand, persistent, surprise, in several towns claimed as their own. Or so it says here that a revolution city is a slum. I went in to buy a nifty pen and came out with $47.62 worth of something that weighed about 15 pounds. Small copperhead, coiled and sleepy, strikes at me with a pink tongue. Bullet at twice the speed of sound can shatter an organ it does not touch. Her eyes are down, but her chin is high, as if she were carrying water on top of her head. She walks away at an angle, and her shiny blue ai dao turns back my flash. Fox lying dead on pavement, the only thing I remember in an 8-hour drive. Walked to buy milk in a driving rain because I couldn't finish the sentence. In fact, when I really look at this, he's headless, bent down so far between her back and the mural's nearest point, its most detailed figures, that he simply disappears. I will stop now and let these wonderful performers take the stage. Thanks for your attention.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Tichy. I know she has a class a little bit later this afternoon herself, and it was so great to have you come and speak with us. So I was thinking, Ms. Tichy is from George Mason University, we're George Mason High School, and George Mason is a writer, and I wonder if he ever wrote any poetry. Do we know? We know he wrote essays and other things, and he'll be 289 December 11th. So now on to our Poetry Out Loud program. Here's how the program will work. There will be 2 rounds. Each student will introduce himself or herself. Then they will state the title of the poem that they're reciting and the author. And it will go in the order of freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, round 1, and the same thing round 2. Meanwhile, the judges will be assessing these students in the categories of physical presence, voice and articulation, dramatics, level of difficulty, evidence of understanding, and overall performance. So the audience's job is to give each contestant the best advantage. So we ask that you hold your applause until each one has stepped back from the mic, and that will signal the end of their performance. So we wish you all well. And Isabella, please start us off. I'm going to take.
I'm Isabella Ashton, and I will be reciting The Albatross by Kate Bass. When I know you are coming home, I put on this necklace, glass beads on a silken thread, a blue that used to match my eyes. I like to think I'm remembering you. I like to think that you don't forget. The necklace lies heavy on my skin. It clatters when I reach down to lift my screaming child. I swing her, roll her in my arms until she forgets. The beads glitter in the flicker of a TV set as I sat her on my lap and wish away the afternoon. I wait until I hear gate latch lift, turn of key and lock. I sit amongst toys and unwashed clothes. I sit and she fingers the beads until you speak in a voice that no longer seems familiar, only strange. I turn as our child tugs at the string. I hear a snap and a sound like falling rain.
I'm Peter Hensel, and I'll be reciting Alone by Edgar Allan Poe. From childhood's hour, I have not been as others were. I have not seen as others saw. I could not bring my passions from a common spring. From the same source, I have not taken my sorrow. I could not awaken my heart to joy at the same tone. And all that I loved alone. Then in the dawn of my childhood, the night of the most stormy life was drawn. From every depth of good and ill, the mystery which binds me still. From the torrent or the fountain, from the red cliff of the mountain, from the sun that round me rolled with its autumn tint of gold, from the lightning in the sky as it passed me flying by, from the thunder in the storm and the cloud that took the form, when the rest of heaven was blue, of the demon in my view.
I'm Annie Parnell, and I will be reciting They Are Hostile Nations by Margaret Atwood. 1. In view of the fading animals, the proliferation of sewers and fears, the sea clogging, the air nearing extinction, we should be kind. We should take warning. We should forgive each other. Instead, we are opposite. We touch as though attacking. The gifts we bring, even in good faith maybe, warp in our hands to implements, to maneuvers. 2. Put down the target of me you guard inside your binoculars. In turn, I will surrender this aerial photograph. Your vulnerable sections marked in red, I have found so useful. See, we are alone in the dormant field, the snow that cannot be eaten or captured. 3. Here, there are no armies. Here, there is no money. It is cold and getting colder. We need each other's breathing warmth. Surviving is the only war we can afford. Stay walking with me. There is almost time. If we can only make it as far as the possibly last summer.
Hello, I'm Carter Finley. I'll be reading Father reciting Father by Edgar Albert Guest. My father knows the proper way the nation should be run. He tells us children every day just what should now be done. He knows the way to fix the trust. He has a simple plan. But if the furnace needs repairs, we have to hire a man. My father in a day or two could land big thieves in jail. There is nothing he cannot do. He knows no word like fail. Our confidence he would restore. Of that there is no doubt. But if there is a chair to mend, we have to send it out. All public questions that arise, he settles on the spot. He waits not till the tumult dies, but grabs it while it's hot. In matters of finance, he can tell Congress what to do. But oh, he finds it hard to meet his bills as they fall due. It almost makes him sick to read some of the things that lawmakers say. Why, Father's just the man they need. He never goes astray. All wars he'd very quickly end, as fast as I can write it. But when a neighbor starts a fuss, his mother has to fight it. In conversation, Father can do many wondrous things. He is built upon a wiser plan than presidents or kings. He knows the ins and outs of each and every deep transaction. We look to him for theories, but look to Ma for action.
My name is Leah, and I'll be reciting Her Kind by Anne Sexton. I have gone out, a possessed witch, haunting the black air, braver at night. Dreaming evil, I have done my hitch over the plain houses, light by light, lonely thing, 12-fingered, out of mind. A woman like that is not a woman, quite. I have been her kind. I have found the warm caves in the woods, filled them with skillets, carvings, shelves, closets, silks, innumerable goods. Fixed the suppers for the worms and the elves, whining, rearranging the disaligned. A woman like that is misunderstood. I have been her kind. I have ridden in your cart, driver, waved my nude arms at villagers going by, learning the last bright roots, survivor, where your flames still bite my thigh and my ribs crack where your wheels wind. A woman like that is not ashamed to die. I have been her kind.
I'm Annie Ferguson, and I will be reciting Speak by Philip B. Williams. A storm and so a gift. Its swift approach lifts gravel from the road. A fence is flattened in the course of the storm's worst attempt at language. Thunder's umbrage. A tree is torn apart, blown upward through a bedroom window. A boy winnows through a pile of shards for the sharpest parts of the blown apart glass. He has a bag that holds found edges, jagged as a stag's horns, or smooth as a single pane, smashed into smaller panes he sticks his hand into to make the blood web across his acheless skin, flexing like fish gills, lipped for a scream it cannot make. He wants to feel what his friends have felt, the slant of fear on their faces he can never recreate, his body configured without pain. When his skin's pouting welts don't rake a whimper from his mouth, he runs outside, arms up for the storm, aluminum baseball bat held out to the sky, until lightning with an electric tongue makes his viscera luminescent. The boy's first words for pain are the light's new words for home.
My name is Noah Hain, and I will be reciting The Second Coming by William Butler Yeats. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming. Hardly are those words out when a vast image out of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight. Somewhere in the sands of the desert, a shape, lion body in the head of a man, a gaze, blank and pitiless as the sun, is moving its slow thighs while all about it reel the shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle. And what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born.
I'm Olivia Hoppy, and I will be reciting Eating Poetry by Mark Strand. Ink runs from the corners of my mouth. There is no happiness like mine. I have been eating poetry. The librarian does not believe what she sees. Her eyes are sad, and she walks with her hands in her dress. The poems are gone. The light is dim. The dogs are on the basement stairs and coming up. Their eyeballs roll. Their blonde legs burn like brush. The poor librarian begins to stamp her feet and weep. She does not understand. When I get on my knees and lick her hand, she screams. I am a new man. I snarl at her and bark. I romp with joy in the bookish dark.
I'm offering this poem by Jimmy Santiago Baca. I'm offering this poem to you since I have nothing else to give. Keep it like a warm coat when winter comes to cover you, or like a pair of thick socks the cold cannot bite through. I love you. I have nothing else to give you. So does a pot full of yellow corn to warm your belly in winter. It is a scarf for your head to wear over your hair, to tie up around your face. I love you. Keep it. Treasure it, as you would if you were lost, needing direction. In the wilderness, life becomes when mature, and in the corner of your drawer. Tucked away like a cabin or hogan, in dense trees. Come knocking. I will answer, give it directions, let you warm yourself by this fire, rest by this fire, make you feel safe. I love you. It is all I have to give and all anyone needs to live. To go on living inside when the world outside no longer cares whether you live or die. Remember, I love you.
This poem is Invictus by William Ernest Henley. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloodied but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.
The Lake Isle of Innisfree by William Butler Yeats. I will arise and go now, and go to Innisfree, and a small cabin build there of clay and wattles made. 9 bean rows will I have there, a hive for the honeybee, and live alone on the bee-loud glade. And I will have some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow, dropping from the vales of the morning to where the cricket sings. There midnight's all a glimmer, and noon a purple glow, and evening full of the linnet's wings. I will arise and go now, for always, night and day, I hear lake water lapping in low sounds by the shore. When I stand on the roadway, or in the pavement's gray, I hear it in the deep heart's core.
Solitude by Ella Wheeler Wilcox. Laugh, and the world laughs with you. Weep, and you weep alone. For the sad old earth must borrow its mirth, but has trouble enough of its own. Sing, and the hills will answer. Sigh, it is lost on the air. The echoes bound to a joyful sound, but shrink from voicing care. Rejoice, and men will seek you. Grieve, and they turn and go. They want full measure of all your pleasure, but they do not need your woe. Be glad, and your friends are many. Be sad, and you lose them all. There are none to decline your nectared wine, but alone you must drink life's gall. Feast, and your halls are crowded. Fast, and the world goes by. Succeed and give, and it helps you live, but no man can help you die. There's room in the halls of pleasure for a large and lordly train, but one by one we must all file on through the narrow aisles of pain.
The Applicant by Sylvia Plath. Do you wear... First, are you our sort of a person? Do you wear a glass eye, false teeth, or a crutch, a brace or a hook, rubber breasts or a rubber crotch, stitches to show something's missing? No, no, then how can we give you a thing? Stop crying, open your hand, empty, empty. Here is a hand to fill it, and willing to bring teacups and roll away headaches and do whatever you tell it. Will you marry it? Will you marry it? It is guaranteed to thumb shut your eyes at the end and dissolve off sorrow. We make new stock from the salt. I notice you are stark naked. How about this suit, black and stiff but not a bad fit? Will you marry it? It is waterproof, shatterproof, proof against fire and bombs through the roof. Believe me, they'll bury you in it. Now your head, excuse me, is empty. I have the ticket for that. Come here, sweetie, out of the closet. Well, what do you think of that? Naked as paper to start, but in 25 years she'll be silver. In 50 gold, a living doll everywhere you look. It can sew, it can cook. It can talk, talk, talk. It works, there is nothing wrong with it. You have a hole, it's a poultice. You have an eye, it's an image. My boy, it's your last resort. Will you marry it, marry it, marry it?
I will be reciting Squirrels by Nate Klug. Something blurred, warmed in the eye's corner, like wood smoke becoming tears. But when you turned to look, the stoop was still. The pumpkin and the tacky mum pot wouldn't talk, just a rattle at the gutter and a sense of curtains somewhere pulled. 5 of them later, scarfing the oak's black bowl, laying a dream of snakes. Needy and reticent at once, these squirrels in charred November recall in Virgil what it is to feel. Moods, half moods, swarming, then darting loose. Obscure hunches that refuse to speak, but still expect, in a flash of luck, to be revealed. The less you try to notice them, the more they will know of you.
La Belle Dame sans Merci by John Keats. Oh, what can ail thee, knight-at-arms, alone and palely loitering? The sedge has withered from the lake, and no birds sing. Oh, what can ail thee, knight-at-arms, so haggard and so woe-begone? The squirrel's granary is full, and the harvest done. I see a lily on thy brow, with anguish moistened fever dew, and on thy cheeks a fading rose, fast withered too. I met a lady in the meads, full beautiful, a fairy's child. Her hair was long, her foot was light, and her eyes were wild. I made a garland for her head, and bracelets too in fragrant zone. She looked at me as she did love, and made sweet moan. I set her on my pacing steed, and nothing else saw all day long, for sidelong would she bend and sing a fairy's song. She found me roots of relish sweet, and honey wild and manna dew, and sure in language strange she said, I love thee true. She took me to her elfin grot, and there she wept and sighed full sore, and there I shut her wild, wild eyes with kisses 4. And there she lulled me asleep, and there I dreamed, ah, woe betide, the latest dream I ever dreamed, on the cold hillside. I saw pale kings and princes too, pale warriors, death pale were they all. They cried, La Belle Dame sans Merci hath thee in thrall. I saw I saw the starved lips in the gloom, with horrid warning gaped wide. With horrid warning gaped wide. And I awoke and found me here, on the cold hillside. And this is why I sat in here, alone and palely lurching, though the sedge has withered from the lake, and no birds sing.
Catch Little Rhyme by Eve Merriam. Once upon a time, I caught a little rhyme. I set it on the floor, but it ran right out the door. I followed on my bicycle, but it melted into an icicle. I scooped it up in my hat, then it turned into a cat. I grabbed it by the tail, then it stretched into a whale. I followed it on my boat, then it changed into a goat. When I fed it tin and paper, it grew into a tall skyscraper. Then it grew into a kite and flew far out of sight.
While the judges tabulate, we're going to play Jingle Bell Boogie, and it's going to feature Neil Marshall on tenor saxophone. Next, we'd like to do Birdland, and it's going to feature Kit Richards on tenor sax. That was Tim Winters on bass and Kit Richards on tenor saxophone.
Thank you so much, the Jazz Ensemble. All right, well, we want to recognize all of the participants today with a certificate. And as you know, it takes a great deal of spirit and practice and courage to recite this well. So we think these are the true Mustangs. And we're going to ask them to come together for a picture, if we can get the picture taken now, if you won't mind. And here come certificates. Yeah, you can kind of smush together or however she wants you to do it. Is that better? Together? And then, I think if we stand up maybe, and Annie's going to kind of direct you in the picture. You can clap, it's a good thing. Okay, and now that the judges' scores have been tallied, they were a little nervous because it got so close that it was like a 0.2 difference, so this is rough. The George Mason Poetry Out Loud champions. This winner will go on to the state regional recitation and hopefully on to state and then national competitions. And the second place victor would take the place of the first place winner if, for any reason, the first place person couldn't attend. So our winners today are Carter Fenley, first place. And Annie Parnell. And Annie Parnell, second place. And they have received a year's supply of pizza. I think once a month you get a pizza. And a certificate from Z Pizza, and a certificate to one more page in varying amounts, I think. So thanks again to Ms. Tichy for coming today and to share poetry with us. And as I said, she had to rush off and teach her own class.
Don't leave it.
Okay. And the Jazz Ensemble, thank you to them and for everybody who judged. And Mr. Foster for connecting us up with Ms. Tichy. And what else?
And just one more announcement. Most of this would not have been done if Miss Jean Pratt had not put a lot of her time and effort into this.
And I have to say, great audience, so thank you so much.